All right, we are seeing the broader market sell off a little bit today, although the TSX trying to hold on to some gains. Oil, of course, has been one of the areas that have seen some weakness today. Joining us now in studio is Brett Wilson. He's the chairman of Canoe Financial. Brett, always great to be able to catch up with you in person. Thank you for coming in.
Coming through
in
a snowstorm.
Day.
Yeah, no, a snowstorm today, but that's okay.
Nothing...
That's good for hydrocarbon prices.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Well, the more you consume, anyway.
Right,
simple math.
That's true. That's true. You are an oil guy.
Yeah.
Let's just first get your take on the markets right now and all the volatility. What does this remind you of, and what's your wisdom to our viewer?
Well, the political world that we live in, both north and south of the border, probably exacerbates or adds to the confusion of most investors in terms of, we know the United States is run by Twitter, and every day you wait and see what the new announcement's going to be, and the Canadian government's run by incompetence. And I say that willingly when I look at the challenges they're facing, whether it's international trade, the China file, export pipelines, carbon taxes. They can't seem to win anywhere. They've even fumbled cannabis now.
Well, we'll get to cannabis in a second, but let's go through some of the others that might affect more of our viewers, quite frankly. So China, and then also, of course, Saudi-Canada relations.
Yes.
What's your take in terms of what went wrong? And let's talk hopefully about what might be going right.
Well, we have trade issues with China as a whole, and of course the U.S. has spanked China with massive trade tariffs, and so they've got their own dispute going on. And we're kind of the little kid under the table waiting for crumbs to drop to see what's going to come, because we're a very small market relative to the importance of the U.S.-China trade. And then the other day, as you know, we arrested someone on behalf of the United States, and now we're getting spanked, and we're getting spanked seriously. We're having trouble with both the political and, call it the bureaucracy. You know, McCallum stepped out of line, according to Trudeau, and spoke the truth, according to the Chinese, and now he's fired, and things are all in a, I'm trying to avoid the word storm, but that's the word that seems to work best for that whole thing.
But it is a difficult position to be in, because you want to follow the international rules and laws, which is why Canada did what it did in terms of holding the CFO, the Huawei CFO. So,
well, and a bit of that was protocol, because the U.S. asked us to, and of course those are rules and laws, but those rules and laws I think are breached regularly in the international world. But again, going back, the protocol, we were asked, we did it, and it obviously
And now
upset.
we're suffering some of the consequences.
Well, we're really getting whipsawed by it, because the U.S. gives us no credit for doing it, and China, of course, gives us full blame for doing it. And it's a problem between the U.S. and China over Iran and Hawaii and Huawei, or Huawei, whatever.
Huawei.
Huawei, yeah.
Okay. But what would you have done differently? I mean, because if you're going to critique them,
Yep.
if you're going to critique the current Canadian government, what would you have done differently? Because they did follow protocol. The U.S. is our largest trading partner.
I might have pushed back pretty hard on the U.S. and said, now is not the time for us to be doing that arrest. You know, again, rules be damned. We have bad guys running around cross-border, inside, outside Canada all the time, and that sort of breach strikes me as one that the U.S. had to solve, not put Canada in the middle. I would have just pushed back right at that step.
Okay, let's talk about Saudi-Canada relations. And you just rolled your eyeballs, and the camera didn't get it. that wasn't something on my control room. I wanted them. I didn't know you were going to do it. Why are you rolling your eyeballs?
It's an element of frustration. You know, we're importing Saudi oil. We've got people complaining regularly about the fact that we're selling arms. I think arms is an exaggeration. We're selling armored vehicles, which are a fairly fungible product, could be bought anywhere in the world, and those actually create what Trudeau likes calling those middle-class jobs. So we've got jobs now at risk over shipping trucks to Saudi Arabia, and yet we willingly have been buying $10 billion a year worth of oil from Saudi Arabia and other. Now, right now, Canada and many people in the oil patch have taken up the Stop Saudi Oil challenge, really to make mention of the fact that we buy a lot of oil from foreign countries, countries that have no rule of law, no respect for the dignity of children and women, no concern for the environment, and we readily import those.
Give us the exact, because you are an oil guy, give us the exact example in terms of where we're actually importing it from, so people really understand that we're importing oil, yet we are an oil-rich nation. It's hard to get your head around.
Well, the last numbers I saw was over 800,000 barrels a day coming in, and it could be larger than that. We actually are importing on the West Coast or the East Coast, but we're importing from Africa, Central America, Venezuela, all sorts of Middle Eastern countries and South African countries. And again, we know that the rule of law doesn't exist there. We know that the respect for women and children and the laws of Canada don't apply in those foreign nations. Yet we willingly import their oil when we should be an oil exporter. We should be playing in the global markets, and yet we've let, and as we know now, Vivian Krause's work has shown unequivocally, court of law would hold us, that the U.S. oil interests have funded some of the work that's been done to undermine the Canadian oil and gas industry by creating the sheer stupidity of, for example, Whistler or the city of Victoria attempting to sue the oil and gas industry or Canada, or some of the stupidest, most misguided efforts I've ever seen. But they're coached by people who are paid by American interests to undermine Canada's resource industries.
So give us a bit of an indication in terms of how you see this currently affecting the West and how you're seeing all of this play out for the broader Canadian economy.
Well, the undermining of the Canadian oil and gas industry, the resource industry, has been underway for a decade. And I think most people assume that the NEB, as a thoughtful regulatory environment that's worked for 50 years, would have taken place. We assumed that logic would take place. So the oil and gas industry really didn't see it coming. CAP and the PSAC and some of the other organizations that represent the industry assumed that logic and fairness would prevail. And yet that wasn't the case. That's not what's happened. And as a result, we've been undermined. We've been delayed. Obama saw to delaying the Keystone Pipeline. Trudeau ran on killing Gateway, and yet there's another Aboriginal-led, First Nation-led pipeline to go down that same route, more or less, called Eagle Spirit. I think it's Eagle Spirit. But the bottom line is that we've had federal politicians. Harper didn't accomplish what he said he wanted to. He did get some pipelines built, so there's more there than a lot of Liberals will give him credit. But of course, under the Liberals, we've got Gateway is in trouble, and Trans Mountain is gone. And it's been bought, but it's gone from the private sector into the public sector. It's just mass confusion, and that's really what's undermined. It's exaggerated, made the differential in Canada because we had surplus oil. We've had to curtail. Where in the world are you curtailing? It's only the stupidity of what's happened to the Canadian industry.
But how are you seeing this play out on an individual basis in terms of how are individuals being affected?
In the West, it's jobs, and in the West, it's attitude. People become demoralized after a period of time when they're constantly promised and constantly lied to. The promise that we're going to see export capacity, the LNG facilities that are now being held up by a small group of a dozen people claiming to represent. From the outside, and other Aboriginal people have told me that group doesn't represent anyone other than some self-interest in a small region. But we've got these massive pushbacks occurring with virtually no information.
Associated with, of course, the oil industry are the carbon taxes, and you tweet a lot too. You can't just critique the government in the United States. You tweet a lot, and you tweet with Gerald Butts.
Well, the other day, Mr. Butts advised that 80% of people in Ontario would be better off under a carbon tax regime. Well, you extend the logic of if you're better off, why would you reduce consumption? You would consume more, so you can be more better off, using his words.
Well,
the reality
only if you're going to use it to begin with.
Well, but if you're better off with a carbon tax, the more you burn, the better off you are. And the 20% of people who aren't better off don't care because they're in a position to afford to pay the tax, which we're told is supposed to. The sole purpose of the tax is to put a price on pollution. In my mind, the tax, if it's going to stay, should be used to fund research. Not subsidize Tesla purchases. That's stupid. Not subsidize windmill power production.
Which has happened.
That's stupid. Oh, for sure it's stupid. And it's been done. But that's under government policy. It makes no sense at all to subsidize uneconomic production or to subsidize expensive consumption. Those are stupid rules.
But would you even, before any type of carbon tax, would you believe that $1, if you were taxed $1, that full dollar would go into tech development, as an example? Or would you be concerned it'd only be 50%?
Well, I worry about every dollar that I give the government because they take their 20% just to cover admin. They can't even get a payroll system done. So let's not give the government too much credit for how it handles the money. But let's assume a carbon tax has to be put in place. I have always argued that technology is our friend. Technology improving the efficiencies of windmills. I am involved with building a wind farm right now. The economics of a wind farm today are multiples better. There's no subsidies. It's a market-based approach. Well, I wouldn't tolerate a subsidy.
You wouldn't?
I wouldn't play that game.
Even for a windmill that takes tons of
I have a coal-fired
CapEx?
power plant at the same time. I am burning coal. We're converting that to a gas-fired power plant. We also have windmills as part of our portfolio. But again, the economics of windmills, the speed at which they run, the efficiency with which they run, has changed dramatically. Likewise, the efficiencies of batteries.
Let me ask you
but
this,
it's technology that's our friend.
I understand. Yep,
not government regulation.
That I understand. Going back to the windmill for 1 second as an investment that you're invested in, which I'm actually probably a little bit surprised.
Oh, don't be surprised.
Not for any reason
I
other
can
than
make money.
Right. Well, but that's my question. Can you? What's the lifetime of a windmill?
Lifespan of a traditional windmill, depending on the type of wings and arms and you use, 20 years.
That
Easy.
long?
Easy.
That long.
No problem with today's technology.
Okay.
You had to replace the old ones much more rapidly.
Right.
But let's go back. We bid in. What's happening in Alberta is 3 to 5 cents a megawatt. Government of Ontario was paying 30 cents a megawatt for the power that was coming off of the windmills. You call that stupid? I call that really stupid. The fact that they shut down a gas-fired power plant that could have been built in Ontario, I don't remember which government was involved. That was stupid. There's a lot of stupid government involved here. And that's what I like poking, because the more the free market is allowed to make decisions, which is why I push and say technology should be the solution to reducing greenhouse gases and improving the efficiency of everything we do. Technology, not taxation.